Oh, wrong screen. What? Good morning. Sorry, I just realized that I connected the seminar. Good morning. Good morning. I see it's just you so far, Sean. So but good morning. Sorry, I got distracted. Something popped up on my screen here that looked where'd it go? The trouble with computers. Sometimes they pop up stuff that you think looks interesting and then they whatever, and then it just disappears. Um Anyways, thanks for joining me this morning. I'm sure there will be a few more stragglers trickling in um, as the morning goes on, but I don't want to sit here waiting for them and reward the unpunctual people. So uh, let's proceed without further ado. Huh. Hmm. Well, that's fascinating stuff. I'm sorry. It just popped up on my computer that the nurses of Ontario uh, uh, feel that they should be paid the same as the police and the firefighters. I guess. I don't know how they figure that, but I don't have to pay their salary nor do their job. So what do I know? Um, Still the beginning of the year, and in sticking with that theme, um, I'm not nearly as good of an investor as I would like to be. I think none of us ever are, to be honest. Sometimes well, maybe Warren Buffett is. I don't know. When you read his letters, he sounds like he's pretty comfortable with where he's at in life. But in general, most of the investors, when you know, um, read their books, or if you're on their newsletters, or some of them will have annual or monthly or quarterly reports. And if you engage with some of these things, I think one of the unifying characteristics of a lot of successful investors in real estate and otherwise is there's a certain hunger, not a hunger for wealth necessarily, although that's almost certainly there, but there's a hunger to improve, to be better, I guess. um, I actually wasn't going to, but I've got a book here. It's called, doesn't matter what it's called, anyways. It's a book of ancient wisdom. Let's call it that. Nothing religious or anything hokey like that, but just ancient, old school ideas. And I just want to read what it said to me today, because every day it has a passage and it's very, very short. It's just a brief little, you can't see because of the light, but just a brief little passage. It says, a worker is asked, why did you do it this way? The answer, because that's the way we've always done things. The answer frustrates every good boss and sets the mouth of every entrepreneur watering. The worker has stopped thinking and is mindlessly operating out of habit. The business is ripe for disruption by a competitor, and the worker will probably get fired by any thinking boss. We should apply the same ruthlessness to our own habits. In fact, we are studying philosophy precisely to break ourselves of rote behavior. Find what you do out of rote memory or routine and ask yourself, is this really the best way to do it? Know why you do what you do. Do it for the right reasons. Anyways, that's, oh, wait, hold on, I want to give you one more thing. That is a modern interpretation of the words of Musonius Rufus. He was a lecturer and thinker in ancient Rome, and those were some of his thoughts on the wisdom of focusing on what you are doing and trying to improve. You'll notice that in his advice, he draws a distinction between the worker and the quote thinker slash entrepreneur, and how they have different perspectives. And so it is quite clear from reading that passage that in 2000 years, nothing much has changed about the world. There are still workers and there are still entrepreneurs, and workers are still lazy, and entrepreneurs are still trying to think about how to make things better. Now, I'm not a big fan of the word entrepreneur in the modern era because I think a lot of people have taken on that word because it has there's a status, um, there's sort of a status thing associated with it, especially after the tech boom, and you had all these quote unquote tech entrepreneurs who, there are varying degrees of truth to how entrepreneurial some of those people actually were, because a lot of them were coming out of universities and they were being heavily funded, and it wasn't actually all that much personal risk that they were taking. They're certainly good business people. There's no question about that. Whether or not they're truly entrepreneurs is perhaps debatable. But I like to use the term entrepreneur in the more original sense of just somebody who is building or operating a business, right? A starter, right? A CEO who jumps into Johnson & Johnson is not an entrepreneur, right? Now you're an entrepreneur if you invest in real estate. Anybody who invests in real estate is an entrepreneur because you're running a business, your own business, pardon me, and you're starting it and you're responsible for it. It's an entrepreneurial pursuit. Probably all forms of investing are, although I mean, I guess you could make an argument for, going on to the stock market and buying uh VIX or something, right? Like with some of these index funds where you don't really do anything. And I guess you could argue that's not entrepreneurial, right? But in general, um I think we can kind of lump entrepreneur and investor kind of into the same category. And as the quote attests, it's our job as the investor, as the entrepreneur, basically as the pusher or the leader or the puller, whatever you kind of want to designate yourself. It's your job to do the thinking when no one else will. And you're going to find that just out of bad habits, really, people around you, even people who are very smart, bright people, will not think. They will do things out of habit. They will do things out of tradition, and they won't think. And obviously, that's a very dangerous thing, right? We're here talking about real estate investing, probably at least in part, if you're like me, because life presented you with tradition, and the tradition was go to school, work hard, get a degree or a certificate, get a job, retire in 40 years. That's the tradition. It's terrible tradition. Doesn't work very well. Makes a lot of people miserable, sick, and all sorts of things. It's not particularly good for families either. It's hard, and most importantly, it absolutely does not need to be that way. So why do it that way? Why make yourself miserable? Well, only because that's tradition. And if I didn't spend any time thinking about the path that I was going down, then I would go down the path, right? And it's only by stopping, pardon me, it's only by stopping and really considering the options that are in front of me that you pause and you realize, oh, hey, this is a way, but it's not the way, at least not the way for me, right? But that does require you to stop and to be thoughtful. And so I thought that passage, I don't know, it really resonated with me this morning. I guess I'd had a conversation about thinking and or people not thinking. I'd had a conversation like that wrong mouse. I'd had a conversation about that just this weekend, and I thought that was really something to think on, right? Because it is really everything in life. If you're going to do something and succeed at it, period, it's going to be a job of some sort, right? um I mean, even to take like the most depraved example, right? A prostitute, most people enjoy having sex. Prostitutes probably don't, though, right? Like, no matter what your job is, it's going to be a job, right? Same with artists, right? There's lots of people who would paint for free. And yet, I bet if you go to like Disney Studios and ask those artists how they feel about painting something for you, they're probably pretty sick of it, right? This is just life. And being an investor is no different than any other kind of job or business activity in the sense there's something you're going to have to do and it's going to be repetitive. And it may start to feel like work. And that thing is thinking. In this particular case, you got to think, right? Because you need to understand your investments, right? And that's why we're here, because we're trying to learn and we're trying to grow and we're trying to understand better where to spend our time thinking to maximize our return on time and to maximize our return on investment. So, with that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about being above average. Uh, I'm sure that everybody listening to me right now is above average in some capacity. I want to tell you about a time I was above average. It's not an impressive story or anything. It's just a time I'm just trying to illustrate. When I was a kid, I can't remember, 16, 15, whatever. I entered a competition. There's a contest for business and entrepreneurship called DECA at the time. I just joined it on the lark. I had some friends. They were like, hey, let's do this thing. And I was like, okay, let's do the thing. And anyways, we went to the competition in Toronto. So Canada-wide competition where you compete against other kids for your business thing, whatever. And I placed first in Canada for my category because I was good or whatever. I didn't practice or try anything. I just went, and I just happened to be talented, and they liked me. So I placed first for Canada, and that qualified me for the world competition, which was held in Dallas, Texas that year. And so, fortunately, my parents were able to afford to send me to Texas, and I got the opportunity to go compete against the best in the world at this DECA business competition thing when I was 16 years old or whatever. And so, obviously, I was above average. In fact, I was one of the best in all of Canada, and I ultimately ended up placing. It was a long time ago. I don't remember. I think I placed 11th in the world or something like that. Like I was like just outside the top 10 or something. So, anyways, I'm at the time in my particular age group and cohort, I'm one of the best in the world at this particular thing, right? And I want to bring this up. I want to highlight this because maybe you've never had the opportunity to be one of the best in the world. I don't know. Funny enough, you probably have been one of the best in the world at something. You just maybe have never had the chance to measure it. But I want to tell you about this time when I was one of the best in the world because a lot of us we get to watch on TV people be the best in the world, and a lot of us in our own lives we never get to realize the moment when we're one of the best in the world. And usually for most of us it does happen in something or other, even if we aren't aware of it. I am a completely unremarkable, relatively average person in the sense that I'm not extraordinary at all. And being ranked top 11 reflects, it really doesn't reflect much on me at all. It probably reflects more on my competition, really, if we're being honest. But that is obviously being above average, right? There's no disputing that. And the reason why I bring that up is because I want to highlight how incredibly easy it is to be above average, right? It is incredibly easy. I mean, a lot of the times you're above average and you don't even know and it's in ways that you can't even imagine. I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of us here, perhaps all of us, are above average income earners. As people who live in Canada, we might not be above the Canadian average, but we probably blow right past the world average, right? Probably even in the top 20 percentile. Some of us maybe even in the top 10 of the whole world, right? So this is the thing. It doesn't necessarily feel that special to be special. Okay. And I want everybody to understand that really to be above average in most things, only requires effort. It does not require talent. It only requires effort. Yes, to be the number one at something, maybe to be LeBron James, or maybe for me to have placed first in my competition. I don't know. To do things like that may require the combination of both effort and talent. But to just be there in the top 20%, that's just effort. So when we talk about investing, right? Investing for most people is about growing your income, right? You want to retire early, you want to build a legacy, you want to leave wealth for your kids, you want to make sure your family is comfortable, you want to take care of your parents, blah blah blah. Whatever it is, there's always a reason you want the money, right? But usually that's what brings a person to real estate investing, right? Is that they want, right? Essentially, they want to live an above average life in one capacity or another. They're not necessarily looking for a gold plated toilet or anything, but they either want to live the good life or the comfortable life, or maybe they don't want to live a comfortable life, but they want to live an easy life, right? There are some people, the fire community, who they're not interested in making $500,000 a year. They're comfortable if they can retire on 50 and just manage their expenses because they don't want to work, right? Takes all sorts, right? I'm not here to tell you what your goal is or should be. All of those people, even the guy who's living off $50,000 a year, are above average, right? Because most people, whether they earn 50K or not, are not retired. He is. So, right? They're trying to be above average. All you have to do to be above average is to show up. as Woody Allen said, that's 90% of it, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because I know that there are two aspects to investing, and I think to taking action in life in general. There is competency. No, no, no. Let's change it. There is the education continuum, right? Which is awareness, competency, proficiency, and mastery, right? Learning how to do things, right? That's one side of the equation, right? And there's the other side of the equation, which is mindset, belief, willpower, and taking action, right? What you know about a situation combined with what you do about the situation is going to result in is going to give you your results, sorry, right? And it is fine if you want, I can get you an encyclopedia and we can stack up facts so that you can become incredibly competent, right? But if you never couple that with the belief to take action on your competency, then your competency is, oh, why do I keep clicking the wrong thing? If you never join up your competency with some action, then it goes to waste, right? Conversely, if you believe super strongly in yourself and you take action, but you never worry about improving your competency, that is, you never learn, chances are your action is going to lead you astray, right? It's when you combine these two things that you can actually move up the education continuum and become both. You can both improve your understanding of what you are doing, right? But and also take action to move and make change in the world, right? So I said the education continuum again. That is awareness, right? Competency, proficiency, and mastery. And just really briefly, if there's something that you're learning, first you must become aware of it. So there was a time when you didn't realize people invested in real estate. So that would be before you were aware of it. Then somebody clued you in that, hey, this is the thing people do. So now you were aware of it, but you didn't know how to do it or anything. So then maybe you became aware of it. You decided, oh, I'm going to get a book. I'm going to read, I don't know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Sure, it's not a book that teaches you really how to invest, but whatever. I'm going to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's going to teach me about real estate investing. So now I'm competent, right? I have an understanding of what is being done, but I'm not proficient, right? I could explain to Armando how to kick a soccer ball, but we all know he doesn't know how to play soccer, so he'd have to figure it out. That's a joke, by the way. Armando, good soccer player, but right, he'd have to figure it out, right? I can't explain the mechanics of how to play soccer to you. You have to play it. So the travel from competency, right, reading what the rules of a soccer game are, for example, to playing in a soccer match, that requires practice, right? You've got to apply the things that you've read and learned to see what works and doesn't. And that's what we then call proficiency. And then, of course, you move from proficiency to mastery, which is where you can basically do things without thinking. And we can all think of things that we've mastered in our lives. Maybe there's a dish you know how to cook, you don't have to think about it. Or for a lot of people, driving, right? A lot of times you drive after you've been driving for 10 or 15 years, or maybe even less time, I don't know. You'll start to find yourself going places on autopilot, just kind of driving and not even realizing you were doing it because your brain has become so good at it. You've mastered the skill so much that you can do it completely on autopilot, right? Those are kind of the four stages of learning, right? Of awareness, of building, of growing, right? And we all move through those steps, right? But we have to couple that education with the mindset, with the belief, with the that's what Rich Dad Poor Dad is about more. It's more about mindset. He has books that teach you how to invest in real estate, but that one doesn't really. You got to couple that with that because you got to take action. And to go back to what I was saying about being above average, your average Canadian does not own any real estate for investment purposes. Your average Canadian does not. According to the CMHC, and I think these numbers might be bogus, but according to the CMHC, 20% of housing purchases last year were for investment purchases. 80% of them were not. So you can see there's an 80-20 thing going on already. If you had bought one of those investment properties, you're in the 20%, not the 80%. You see? I think the number for top 1% real estate investors in Canada is to own 4 properties. I think that's what it is. Either 4 or 5 properties. Being the top 1% of real estate investors in Canada. Okay? The bar So much lower than you think it is, right? And there's so much possibility out there, but you have to be willing to take a chance, take a risk, go out there and do it. You know, I've talked about this property several times, but I have a property and it is now in good condition. But when we bought it, there were holes in the roof, there were birds living in our roof, there were problems. We had two crackheads overdose. I mean, problems. Maybe they weren't crackheads. I don't know what the situation was. They're dead though. One got eaten by his dog. It was a tough situation. We had bad stuff happen. It was not easy. Now, actually, from my perspective and the perspective of my partners, nothing was super hard. I mean, sometimes we got more phone calls than we wanted, and once or twice it cost us more money than we wanted it to. But in general, nothing was actually all that difficult. Just by buying that one house, just by buying the one house, uh, probably able to grow my net worth by 150, almost $200,000 in a year or so. Thing is, you had to take action. A better investor than me maybe could have grown their net worth by $250,000. I don't know, right? Like I'm sure money was wasted and we didn't do everything right, but we learned and we did enough things right. We made money and it puts us ahead, right? And the next time will be better, right? And the next time after that will be better. So that's something that I guess I wanted to touch on because I've noticed. I guess I haven't noticed. We've been living with this for some time. For some time with the COVID and the lockdowns and the vaccine passports and the this and the that. And I don't want to get into the politics. I never do, but I do want to talk about it a little bit because obviously I'm talking to you as a person who invests in real estate to try and share what I've learned and what I know, and try to give you a more realistic perspective from a person who's as regular and normal as you or anybody you'd meet at the grocery store, to tell you what it's like for me to grow my real estate portfolio. And I'm not done and I'm not retired yet, but I'm working on it and maybe I've got a leg up on you kind of a thing, right? And of course, a, a component of that is I spend a lot of my time thinking about, reading about, listening to others talk about real estate, right? Because it's a continual process of learning and growth and development. And you can see behind me, they're maybe not in focus, but I've got real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate. This is not real estate, but it's about self development or whatever. There's a lot of real estate. I spend a lot of time on that. You don't even want to see what's on my Kindle. Um, I read a lot of books and I listen to a lot of investors. And one of the things I've noticed about the Canadian investors, and it's hard, most of the investors are Americans. To be fair, it's a much bigger place, but there are some Canadians, on YouTube and what have you, doing podcasts, that sort of thing. One of the things I've noticed lately is a lot of them are talking about moving. They're talking about leaving Canada. I know an investor who's in Florida right now looking at condos. I mean, he's been a real estate investor in Canada for 10 years and a very successful one, much more so than myself. Um, he is probably almost an 8-figure net worth, right? So that's tens of millions of dollars at this point. Maybe not quite. Maybe it's like 9.5 something, but like right around there. And he's thinking about moving to Florida because our government, well, obviously, it's kept him locked down for 2 years, as it's done to all of us, and he doesn't like that. He has options. But also, in Quebec, they're talking now about taxing the unvaccinated and all these kind of draconian measures. And the funny thing is, the province of Ontario Ministry of Health came out with a report that shows negative efficacy on the vaccines. So I hate those people who say trust the science because they're the first people who don't know a thing about science. But if you want to see the report from Ontario's medical minds, then they're of the opinion that the vaccine does not work. I can link you to the papers that they published if you want to see for yourself. It's very amazing to see the difference between the politicians who have whatever to say, and they're certainly very sure of everything, and then actually going to the scientific minds and seeing what their reports and studies are saying, because they at no point during this entire pandemic have they lined up. Like, the irony of the people who say trust the science is that those people have never engaged with the science. They've only engaged with what the politicians say about the science. The science has never been nearly as clear as, unfortunately, our politicians have tried to pretend that it is. And so anyways, we're in this situation now where people have got their backs up and everybody's upset and blah 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 whatever, and the vaccinated people feel the unvaccinated are the problem, and the unvaccinated feel that the vaccinated are the problem. And I mean, the problem is a virus that has nothing to do with either of these two groups of people, and yet they've managed to make the whole problem about them, right? And that's kind of a microcosm for what people do. Okay, just in case you ever look at life and you're confused, because I do all the time, right? COVID response is an exact blueprint for why people are as effed up as they are. When you meet those people, or maybe you don't meet them, maybe you see them on TV, whatever, you see some person who's like poor and they're complaining about their poorness, but they're doing all of the things that guarantee that they'll be poor. This is how that happens because people confuse themselves. We have a problem today with COVID. I mean, I would argue we don't have a problem, but whatever. If you're going to go with the mainstream narrative, we have a problem. Its name is COVID-19, and we need to do something about it. Well, that's always dubious. Just because you have a problem doesn't mean you need to do something about it. Sometimes, if you get a hangnail, for example, right, the only thing to do is kind of try not to touch it and wait for it to heal, right? Sometimes there's nothing to do actually. But anyways, we've got this problem. Well, how do you solve the problem, right? I don't know. Okay, well, since we don't know how to solve the problem, let's start blaming people. Okay, that sounds like a good plan. That's what people do, right? So we've got a situation right now where they don't know what to do. They couldn't identify their head from their butthole. But they do know who to blame. It's the unvaccinated. It's the conservatives. It's the liberals. It's the this. It's the that. Everybody's got somebody to blame. And really, what they should stop and do is say, look, I don't know who's at fault. I'm not entirely sure that I understand all that is going on. What I do know is that it is hard to get sick from people who I'm not near. So there's probably something to this social distancing thing. Maybe not to stand 6 feet apart, but certainly if I don't go to the grocery store, then you can't get me sick, right? So maybe I'll do that. And you know, all the evidence points to the fact that healthy people do better than unhealthy people. So I can go to the gym, or I can watch my diet, or I can do both. Maybe even take some vitamins. I hear that there are certain vitamins that apparently help, right? Whatever it is, those are the proactive things that you can do as an individual to make sure you as an individual succeed. It's the exact same thing with real estate investing. You know, you're going to have financial planners and advisors on the TV telling you that the sky is falling financially, that the end is nigh, that this and that, and the next thing is going to happen, that the stock market, that the housing market, that the this, that the that. I can guarantee you this. Those people who are talking, they don't know a thing about a thing. I mean, journalists in general don't know anything about anything. They went to school to learn how to write. That's what they went to school for. So they don't know anything. They know how to write nicely, which is certainly a skill, but then they don't know what to write about or how to write about it. And this is the nature of life. They're trapped in that competency stage if they've even made it that far. They may only get to awareness, right? They never advance to proficiency or mastery, except maybe in writing. And so they don't understand how some of these things that they're talking about work, right? Anyways, I'm kind of meandering a little bit, but to get back to the real estate investors who got me started on this, a lot of them are talking about leaving, right? And they're talking about leaving for a variety of reasons, but the number one is because people are being inaccurate in their thinking, right? And they're trying to impose laws and rules and restrictions on people that don't make any sense. And you know, a real estate investor is the type of person who has trained their thinking to be relatively accurate to try to make sense, because if you don't think accurately about your investment, then you're liable to lose money, right? So they're trying to think accurately, and it's becoming annoying for them. They want to leave. They have the ability to leave because they have money, and when you have money, doors open for you in this world. That's life. Okay, you may want to leave, and you may feel frustrated because you may not be in the same position as them to leave. I wanted to let you know that probably anybody listening to me is able to leave Canada to move to the United States if they would like to. In America, they have something called an EB5 investor visa. That is Edward Bravo 5. This visa allows you to become a permanent resident into the United States with a green card, which means that you have a pathway to citizenship if you'd so desire. It requires an investment of $500,000 into an active business in the United States. That means you cannot buy stocks. It's got to be, you got to like buy a car wash or something. Now, the great news, as you all know from listening to me talk about real estate investing, is that we have the power of leverage. When you buy real estate, you do not have to put 100% of the money into it. You only need to put 20%. So, even though it is $500,000 to invest in the United States, you could technically qualify for a mortgage and purchase the property. It would only cost you $100,000. So it is possible to qualify for an EB-5 investor visa for 100,000 US dollars. And of course, you didn't spend that money, you invested in a business. So, assuming you run that business well, you'll keep or even grow that money. So there are options. I'm not saying that it is super duper straightforward. Obviously, buying a business from here in the States would be hard and blah, blah, blah. But I just wanted to let you know it is an option. I believe strongly, me personally, I believe strongly in freedom. And I believe strongly that what our government is doing is completely wrong. Not only do I think it's wrong, I think it's actually making the problem worse. That's my personal opinion, and it doesn't matter if you agree with me or not. You know what? You're more than welcome to believe what you want to believe. But I do believe so strongly in freedom, and I think that if you give people the option, most of them are going to choose not to live with this tyrannical nonsense. And so it's a sad thing. I've heard my entire life about the Canadian brain drain, how smart, successful, capable Canadians move away, usually to America, sometimes to the UK. And I don't know. As a kid, I never really understood. I guess I was a dumb kid. I never really understood. Like, yeah, why would you leave? Canada's great. As an adult who's actually trying to accomplish something now, I completely understand. Canada's not really a country that wants you to accomplish much, sadly. And I'm sure that ebbs and flows with time and with who's in office and blah blah blah. But I don't think who's in office actually matters that much. Like, to me, it's more the attitudes of my fellow Canadians that matter, right? And I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, I'll move on. Oh, there was one last thing I wanted to say about that, and then I'll move on to some actual real estate. Um, we're in a very interesting time period, I think. I mean, that's obvious with the pandemic and everything, and people will maybe look back on this particular couple of years and say something happened there, in history. But I think we're in a broader sense, like as a culture or a society, we're in a very interesting time. A long time ago, there was a man. His name was Booker T. Washington. You've probably heard of him. If you haven't, well, that's just a shame on our education system, because probably we should all have heard of Booker T. Washington. And a time before that, quite a bit before him, there were some other men, and their names were Rousseau and Locke. And a long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there were some other people named Luke and the Empire. And what do all these people have in common? Booker T. Washington, for those of you who don't know, very famous black entrepreneur. He founded the Tuskegee Institute in Atlanta, Georgia, and a very successful businessman in the 19th century. So he lived in the 1800s. He was born on a plantation. He was born into slavery. He was one of the very last people to be born into slavery, because it ended like the year he was born or something like that. Born on a plantation. He grew up. He was illiterate. He moved eventually. I can't remember where he moved to, but he moved when he was a teenager to a school. He went to a school, and he asked them to enroll him into the school. Of course, he was illiterate, so they weren't inclined. And so they kind of gave him a test, which was he had to clean the school, basically, if he was going to get in. He cleaned the crap out of that school. He cleaned the whole damn school. And he said, "You're going to teach me." And they did. And he learned to read and write and do all of the things. And then he started some businesses, and eventually he founded a university. And he was a very influential man. He had a great life and career. And he had a disagreement. He had a central disagreement, and unfortunately, I don't have much respect for the man who he disagreed with, so I'm having a great deal of trouble remembering his name. He was, oh yeah, that's his name. W.E.B. Du Bois was the man who they publicly debated. They wrote each other in letters. They did not agree. These are two black men in the 1800s, and they had two very, very different philosophies. Booker T. Washington looked at the world and said, "This is the world, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make myself better." He once famously said that no black man with skills would ever go hungry because he believed that if you worked hard, racist white people were not going to hold you down. His contemporary W.E.B. Du Bois believed more or less the opposite. He believed that you couldn't go anywhere as a person until the society accepted you, quote unquote. And that really, in a society that didn't accept you, the only solution was to tear that society down and replace it with something new. I hope that the lines of thinking of these two men sound familiar to you, because I feel that this thinking has been resurrected, or perhaps it never went anywhere, uh, in the modern era. There is still this debate going on between the Booker T. Washingtons of the world and the W.E.B. Du Bois of the world. And it's a confusing argument. I think W.E.B. Du Bois, whatever you could say about him, he's a pretty persuasive fellow. He's a pretty persuasive fellow. And so, for those of you who don't know the history, I just want to tell you how this story ends. It's a very fascinating story. And if you don't know very much about Booker T. Washington and you're a black person, I highly, highly recommend. If you're not a black person, then he may not be as interesting to you, but he is still a very, very impressive individual. And so, really, anybody who's interested in impressive individuals, he was certainly one of them. W.B. Du Bois, again, if you're black, you might take an interest in, just as a curiosity of black history. If you're not black, I wouldn't waste my time. The guy was a bit of an idiot. But this is what the two men sort of professed. Right? Booker T believed in himself and working hard and overcoming, and WB believed sort of in the collective, the society, and in changing it. Right? And obviously, it looks like we're still having this debate today. So, how did the scorecard end for Booker T and W.B. Du Bois? Booker T died a millionaire, the founder of the Tuskegee Institute. He left a legacy of building up Atlanta, Georgia, which is one of the wealthiest, most successful black areas in America. And his school, the Tuskegee Institute, has produced, to this date, more black millionaires than any other school in America. That is Booker T. Washington's legacy. He's a freaking amazing legacy. W.B. Du Bois died alone, syphilitic, angry at the world, and dead broke. He was an avowed communist, a member of the I don't remember what their organization was called, the Communists of America or whatever they were called. This is 100 and something years ago, right? So, and he actually didn't die in America because of his very communistic ways. He eventually got himself kicked out and he went to Europe and he died there. I can't remember where. It might have been France, but doesn't matter. Anyways, he had a very sad end to his life. He did not found any schools that taught any great people. He did not help anybody become a millionaire. He didn't really do very much for people. So these are the two perspectives that are kind of battling against each other. Before them, there was Rousseau and Locke. And actually, I should switch them around. There was Locke and Rousseau so that it lines up with Booker and W.E.B. They had the exact same argument. They had the exact same argument. Now, they were dudes, right? They were in Europe. They were a few hundred years prior, maybe like 150, 17th century. They had the exact same argument as Booker T and W.E.B. Du Bois, more or less. I mean, at the time, Rousseau didn't understand communism because it hadn't been coined yet, and he didn't see himself as a communist. But more or less, they had the exact same argument. Locke talked about how individuals have responsibility, individuals make choices, individuals grow the world, and Rousseau talked about how society controls us and dominates us, and we need to change society and all this stuff, right? Finally, I get to my last example, the furthest back in history, which is Luke Skywalker and the Empire, right? Luke Skywalker fought against the Empire because famously the Empire has a penchant for putting people in stormtrooper uniforms where they all look the same and all of their individuality is taken away from them and they're forced to do what they're told, right? Luke Skywalker is an individual who doesn't wear a uniform, who does what he wants, when he wants, if he wants. He has to learn, he has to grow, he has to understand. And even though he starts out as a weakling who's not capable of being a stormtrooper, he ends his arc by becoming the most powerful man in the galaxy and defeating the Emperor, right? This is a conflict that is central to humanity, the conflict between the individual who is empowered and the collectivist who is not empowered but seeks to use the power of the group to, well, usually collectivists want to hold other people down. It's usually what they do, but whatever it's, right? This is the central conflict. You'll see it in movies, in media, TV shows, art, paintings, comics. You see it in history for sure, and you see it all of the time in politics. So just know, be aware, okay, that you as a person who wants to invest, who is taking responsibility for yourself and your financial future as an individual, you're joining a very, very healthy tradition of people who have decided that I am an individual and I can make the world better. To paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi, I can be the change I want to see in the world, right? And this is true. This is absolutely true, right? Can't change the world. That's impossible. I shouldn't say that's impossible because you can change the world, but you can never change it the way you want to all at once. You could change a little bit of it, right? Um, but you can absolutely control and change who you are and how you choose to do things and how you choose to treat people. And that's, I mean, I hope that's what brings you all here, not the airy fairy stuff, obviously the nuts and bolts of actually doing it. But I hope that's what brings you here, right? Is an individual recognition that you have the power to make your life whatever you want it to be, but only if you take action and do the things that you know that you need to do, right? Certainly, for example, we all have the ability to become bodybuilders. I'm not saying that any of us will win a competition, but we could all get yoked, right? Do you hit the gym twice a day? Are you taking your protein smoothie, right? If you do these things, you're gonna succeed. You're gonna become a yoked bodybuilder, right? I don't think that's up for debate. So now I'm asking you the exact same thing. We're gonna give you the formula. You know, over the next weeks, we're gonna recap all the stuff I talked about last year. We're gonna go over it all again. Give you the formula. This is what you got to do. The question, of course, is going to be: are you going to follow through and do it? Because this is not a collective endeavor. I can't do it for you. I mean, there are things I could do. I can try to help, and certainly, if you want help, reach out to me. I'm happy to try. Right. But at the end of the day, you're going to do it because at the end of the day, I don't sign the mortgage. You do. Right. I don't risk the money. You do. Right. And I don't lose the money. You do. Right. That's a very important factor as well. Right. So I hope that we're all along for the journey to be the best that we can be. And I really and truly, seriously, this year, you know, if you need help to make things happen, I have consulted for people where I mean, they pay me. My time is not free, but I will be there to help you step by step. I'm not taking responsibility, but I'll certainly make sure everything looks good and give you the thumbs up and hold your hand. That's an option, right? Or if you just have questions, I mean, I'm here gratis. I'll help you out as best I can, right? I really want to see you take action. Like, I can't explain to you how, as long as you're not being an idiot, and really, if you're here, you're not an idiot already, right? Then you're going to buy something. It's going to make you a lot of money. You know, I had one person who I consulted for, and you know, I mean, I'm not going to mince words. I'm not going to try to be cheap. It cost them thousands of dollars for me and my time to do this deal. But they did the deal, and you know, I don't know if they could have done it. Sorry, I know they could have done it without me. I don't know if they would have done it without me. But they did the deal, and now it's been about a year. They've actually moved on. They've done more deals since then. But that first deal made them like $150,000. So they didn't care about the money they gave me. And, you know, again, sometimes life is about showing up. So if you need to spend money to get somebody there to force you to show up, right? Go back to my getting yoked analogy. Sometimes you pay money for a personal trainer. Pay the money then, get fit, right? In this case, since we're talking about financial fitness, definitely pay the money if it's gonna get you financially fit. And I'm not saying pay it to me. I'm not trying to sell you anything. You're gonna have to kind of chase me if you want to give me the money. I know. I'll pick on Armando here. Many years ago, Armando to a company who basically does that coaching stuff, named Keyspire, and it's a company I've done business with as well. Although I didn't end up buying their product, but I do know other investors who have. He bought the product. It's a very expensive product too. It's like $20,000. They got him to buy a house. I can guarantee you he made more money on that house than the 20,000 he spent. I guarantee you that. So this is one of those things where I'm just saying, right? Because I'm focused very much on taking action. The mindset right now is you gotta take action. I'm not saying take action tomorrow. I'm not saying do it recklessly, but action is one of the absolute requirements for getting ahead in doing anything really, but especially real estate investing. And action gets you results. So when you go buy that house, it makes you money. So even if it costs you a bit of money to go take that action, if you spend $10,000 to make $100,000, you profited $90,000, right? And that is kind of how you have to look at it sometimes. Because really, I know before I did my first deal, you will sit there and you will paralyze yourself just thinking about all the things that can go wrong. And you really will never understand how little any of those things matter until you do it. And then you see how little they matter because some of them do go wrong, right? When you get $1,000 water bill because one of your toilets is messed up, that is the kind of thing that would stop you from saying, I want to buy beforehand. And then when it happens, you're like, well, this sucks. I wanted that $1,000, but I can't have it this month. And then you move on with your life. It really is that straightforward. Okay. So I told you about the investor visa. Last thing, because I've run over long. I've been too wordy, and I'm sorry. I hope no, don't do that. Sorry. I hope that's there we go. Hope that wasn't too much for everybody. Here I want to show you a property. Okay. This is a property in Sudbury. For those of you who missed last week, I talked. I'm just real briefly. I talked about the interest rate trap in the GTA, right? And how when interest rates move against the market, don't know when that'll be, but when they do, they're going to force prices down, right? And so, as an investor, you don't necessarily want to be in a market that was just at the top of the market and then prices start moving against you because you're going to find yourself in a very difficult position. Now, obviously, if you have cash flow, the value of your underlying asset is not as important, right? As long as you have positive monthly cash flow. So if you're buying properties purely for their cash flow in Toronto, go ahead and continue by all means. Most people do not buy properties only for cash flow in Toronto. That is the trouble. And that's where people are really going to get burned. That's where we're going to see a lot of the fallout is we're going to have people who are speculating on the valuation of the homes. Their valuation turn against them. They're going to panic sell, but they're all going to do it at the same time, which means they're going to bottom out the value because they're going to flood the market, right? And supply versus demand, we know the prices are going to drop. And that's how people are going to get burned. And then they're going to complain, oh, we need the government to protect us from ourselves, even though they completely did it to themselves. And the government will probably even step in and be like, oh, we do these investor, blah, blah, blah. Look at all this. Because the government loves to get in there with the panic and stir things up. Right. So be mindful of that. We're looking for cash flowing investments, probably outside of the GTA, although anywhere they cash flow is fine. But it turns out in Southern Ontario, if you want cash flow, you're headed outside the GTA if you're a small time investor. Okay. And so, sorry, there we go. Enter 362 St. George Street in Sudbury, Ontario. Now, I invest in Sudbury. That's why I'm showing you Sudbury. Obviously, you could go to KWC or something like that. I just happen to like Sudbury. So those are the properties I show you. This property is on the market right now. You can make an offer on it. So if you're interested, you could get off of this seminar. You could call my boy, Brent, that guy right there, handsome man, Brent Byers, up there in Sudbury, and you make an offer on this property if you want to. Anyways, this property is listed for $399. It is a 5-plex. Okay, $399 is a low price in Sudbury for the last year and a half or so. The price has trended from about 75 to 100K per unit to about 100 to 125K per unit. And plus, we're actually seeing plus now sometimes. So 5 units for $400,000 is an average valuation of like $75,000 per unit is low. It's actually a valuation of $80,000 per unit, but whatever. That's kind of low. So this price has probably been picked to try to start a bit of a bidding war. Although the house could use some work. So maybe it's not so much a bidding war as it's just a recognition that the property is not up to market. Either way. So $400,000 to buy this property, which means if you put 20% down, and of course you could put 10, but if you put 20% down, it would cost you $80,000 out of pocket, approximately 79.9, right? That's 80% of it. Your mortgage rate would be around a 2% interest rate, depending on your credit and particulars, whatever. And if we amortize for 30 years, we're going to end up with a mortgage payment of $1,181.61. It's a very low mortgage. The property is not very expensive, so that makes sense, right? My guess is it's going to be bid up a bit, so probably you can't get this for 4, but maybe for like 450, maybe, I don't know, depends how aggressive you are. Maybe if you threw in an offer right, you would get it for 4. I don't know. I don't know what the situation is. I haven't spoken to the realtor. It has 5 2-bedroom units. 2-bedroom units in Sudbury. It definitely depends on your location, but they range from about 1,100 maybe up to 1,500 depending on where you are. I don't own any properties in any areas that are nice enough to be 1,500 per 2-bed, and this does not appear to be in one of those areas. So I'm gonna analyze this at $1,200 per bedroom, which I think is pretty conservative. I have 5 2-bedroom bedrooms, $1,200 each, $6,000 per month in cash flow. So hopefully already your spider sense is tingling a little bit. If my monthly mortgage payment is $1,181 and my monthly cash flow is $1,000, that's almost $5,000 of spread. Chances are I can make some money on this property, right? So far, so good. So if we had to pay some land transfer tax, of course, so there's almost $5,000 lost land transfer tax, and we got all of our closing costs. So I say in total, you're going to require about $90,000 to close on this property, approximately, right? And of course, you don't actually. You could do 45 and partner with somebody, right? You could do half of 45. You could do 2250 and partner with 4 people, right? Like there are lots of options, right? Shoot, you could just package this up as a really good deal and say, I'll manage it and get someone else to give you 100% of the money. Theoretically, if these numbers work out the way they look like, and this property is going to cash flow, let's say $1,000 a month, then you could easily see how somebody might be willing to give you $90,000 if you're going to pay them back $6,000 every single year plus, passive appreciation plus mortgage recapture, right? So there are lots of options if you want to do a deal like this. Don't look at the numbers and get lost, right? Going back to my quote at the beginning of the day, right? Don't sit down and do things out of habit. If you see that price, $90,000, you don't sit there and go, oh, well, 90,000, that's a lot of money. I guess I can't afford it, right? You got to sit there and you got to think, okay, I can't afford it, but maybe I know someone who can. Maybe I can entice them with a return. Maybe I can partner with some people. Maybe I can borrow some money. Maybe I can beg, borrow, cheat, and steal. Shoot, I hear if you travel to San Francisco right now, they'll just let you steal as long as it's less than $1,000 worth of stuff. You can just steal things out of the store, man. You can go down there and raise some money. Don't do that, even though it's not a joke. But there are ways. There are ways you can hustle. You can go get that money. You go make this happen. And again, even what I said there is kind of foolish because you don't necessarily need to hustle. Maybe you can make it happen some other way, right? Anyways, let's go to expenses. So we got our mortgage payment, of course, and then we've got taxes. So this place says about $4,000 a year in taxes. My insurance is an estimate. I have a sixplex. I pay a little bit more than this on. This is a fiveplex. Depending on the plumbing and the electrical situation, that could be quite a bit higher, or it could be a little bit lower. Obviously, if there's like knob and tube, or if there is like cast iron plumbing, insurance will charge quite a bit more. So depending on what's in the house, that could be a low estimate. But if it's more or less standard, like 1990s onwards, right? So like it's been renovated at some point since the 80s, chances are you're looking at that lower end insurance. Electricity. The listing does not mention separate meters and the pictures don't show them. So I'm assuming you're responsible for the electrical usage in here. So I'm putting $100 per unit per month. So that's $500 per month, $6,000 a year. Water is about half of that, and gas is about the same thing. In my experience, gas usually ends up not to be quite equal to electricity. It usually ends up to be a little bit less. It's pretty close, so we'll put that at $6,000 as well. Sorry, 500. per month as well. Obviously, in the summertime, you're not using gas, right? So the gas bill's quite high in the winter and quite low in the summer. We've got our property manager, of course, because I'm not moving to Sudbury, and landscaping, which I call it landscaping. Really, we're talking about snow plowing, right? Shoveling the driveway, whatever you want to call it. Snow and salt. That's the snow removal and salting. So we're spending about $3,500 per month on our expenses. So again, 6,000 income, $3,500 expenses. Things are looking good so far. We keep going. We can get to our withholdings. 2% for vacancy. That's the vacancy rate in Sudbury. Repairs and maintenance says 8%, but it's actually 7.5%. Doesn't matter. Excel's rounding. So $450 per month for repairs and maintenance. This property is in decent condition. They've done a good job maintaining sort of the envelope. Apparently, there's a new roof. Siding was recently done, that kind of stuff. So all the external stuff looks like it's in pretty good condition. Inside the property, there's not a lot of pictures, but for those of you who can see the screen, I'm just going to show you a quick shot of the inside of the property. Inside of the property varies. So for those of you who saw the first picture, this kitchen, while it is lived in by somebody who's a little bit messy, it looks like a pretty good kitchen, right? Fairly nice cabinets. Looks like fairly modern countertop. Like, it's okay. And then you go over to this one, and it looks like it's from like World War II era. I'm pretty sure that's not dirt on those cabinets. That's like a pattern or something. But either way, it's ugly as all hell. Like, so here's another one, very dated, very kind of ugly looking. So these things need to be probably fixed up a little bit. So I'm estimating quite a large repair cost, and I'm guessing you're going to need to do some maintenance because quite a bit of stuff in there. So that's something. $450 a month for repairs and maintenance. I put my tenant consideration in. As you know, I like to put aside $20 per unit per month, just on the off chance, somebody, again, famous, they get in the spaghetti fight and I need to call someone to clean up spaghetti in my common area. That is a real story that did happen. Here we have a water heater rental. I don't actually know if there's a water heater in this building, but sometimes you got to rent them, so throw it in there as well. Right? Just try the worst case scenario, right? So I'm withholding $700+ per month, which means that after expenses and withholdings, I am left over with $1,779 in cash flow, assuming the property is rented at market rates. Okay. Property probably is not currently rented at market rates. You're going to have to do some work to get it there, right? So that's something you need to understand. This thing is not currently making $1,800 per month, or they wouldn't be selling it for that price. And it's probably making substantially less than that. It's probably maybe making like $800 or $900 per unit across 5 units, or maybe 4 and one's vacant, or something like that. Or maybe it's making like $1,000 a unit and one's vacant, something like that, right? So the cash flow is going to be much, much lower. But we can see here, if you buy this property, right, year one, you buy this property. Excuse me. If you follow my plan, which would be you let it cash flow, in theory, it would produce $21,000 a year in cash flow. That's really good. That's really good. I mean, actually, let's just go up here. That's a 23.63% return on investment. That's a very, very good cash on cash return. If you actually compare that to most investments will not return that kind of cash on cash return. And that's just the cash on cash. We still have the equity play, right? So this is a property that is the way I'm doing it, which is kind of as like a burr flip to yourself kind of a deal. You see, it has very aggressive returns. Principal recapture, we pay off the mortgage almost $8,000 per year. So that's ours in the pocket. Passive appreciation, assuming 2% growth and assuming after rental value is what grows, then you get about $12,000. Assuming that it's not after rental growth, it's pre-rental growth, then it's $400,000 at 2%. It's about $8,000. So it's a little bit less, but just so we're aware. And then active appreciation, I've said you can earn about $92,000 the first year by renovating this. So again, I said it's kind of like a burr, costs $90,000 to get into it, and you can actively profit by about $90,000. So You see that? Now, in order to do that, I estimate it's going to cost you between $100 and $125,000 in renovation costs, because I figure you're going to need, maybe not into every unit, because that first unit I was showing you pictures of actually looks okay. Um, but more or less, probably unit by unit, probably really touch up those kitchens. They all look terrible. If you want market rents, your kitchen's going to have to not look terrible. There was a picture I didn't show you guys. There's also some pictures of the bathrooms. And you can see here, uh, if you see in the picture on the ceiling there, it looks like there's some spotting, might be watermarks. So that would be something you'd have to look out for. But there might be some spotting and stuff. So you might want to touch this up, paint it. Here, this, that's not a disgusting wall. That's like a weird bath mat, shower curtain, sorry. But you can see things look kind of dated here. We've got like a conduit on this wall. So this is obviously some kind of like concrete or plaster wall or something. So things are a little hard to work with in this property, right? Some of it might be quite old. But you can see, yeah, in some of the bathrooms, some of the fixtures and finishes just not very nice in some of the bathrooms. So those are things you'd probably have to look at and work on. Okay. So just something to be aware of. If you put that money into it, then I'm going to value the property after the reno at that 125 per unit valuation. At $125,000 per unit, this property is worth $625,000, right? So in theory, if you can buy this for 400, and you could in theory fix it up and sell it for $625,000, you have $225,000 worth of buffer. It's about a 33% margin. That is about as good as you could ever hope for. That is basically retail numbers, right? When you go to like a retail store or most businesses, right? This is a general rule of thumb. I shouldn't say most. A lot of businesses aim for a 30% margin, right? They want to make 30 cents on them, right? So the idea that you could do a house for 30 cents on the dollar is crazy, because really you can't. And this is something I'm actually probably myself going to take a look at least making an offer. I don't know that I'd want to necessarily buy this and take on this project, because some of the specifics that I don't know yet are going to be factors, right? Is the foundation good? Like, is the building good? Are all of the units legal and conforming, right? These are all important things that are going to definitely color my decision on whether or not I'd want something like this. But this is the type of property where it's 5 units, so you don't have to worry about, commercial. It's still considered residential. But it's 5 2 beds, so that's kind of the best configuration you get for a 5-plex, really. With a lot of upside. Assuming that the property is not filled with like I don't know, like 5 tenants who all refuse to pay rent because of COVID or something, right? You don't know. I mean, that's a possibility. So it's something that needs to be looked at a little bit closer. But I mean, this is a deal. This is out there. This is not. I didn't like hunt for this or anything. This was just on the the listings that my realtor sends me. And obviously, I think it looks like a really fantastic deal. I mean, I'm really seriously considering myself looking into making an offer on it. I mean, the cash flow numbers, I love those cash flow numbers. I love cash flow numbers like that, because even if I'm wrong, and let's be clear, I'm probably wrong about something here, right? Even if I'm wrong, let's say I'm off by 33%. Like, let's say instead of making $21,000 in cash flow, it only makes 14. I'm not complaining about that, right? Like, okay, I'll still take over $1,000 a month in cash money, because I did my analysis wrong. Right, so that's one of those things that, like, usually for me when I'm trying to do an analysis, one of the things I look for is like look for numbers that are way over, because even though you might be making assumptions that are putting them way over, if you are, and I've gone over this a few times, and when I review analysis in a few weeks, I'm sure we'll go over it again. But like when you are doing your analysis, you try to be as conservative as possible, right? Like in Sudbury, have I had most of my tenants use $100 per month in electricity? The answer is actually no. Most of them only make it to like 80 or $90. That's the honest truth. But I use 100 in my analysis because one day you're going to get that guy who's like, I don't know, he's mining cryptocurrency and he's costing you $150 a month or whatever, right? And you want to be conservative and know that you've got some margin of error. So here, when I get to my totals, and this is compound all of the analysis I've done before, and therefore compounding all of the mistakes in the assumptions that I've made before, right? If it's going to compound nothing but conservative assumptions, then it is going to give me a conservative number, right? And I'm going to know, hey, there's a lot of potential upside on this number, and there's not necessarily a lot of potential downside. Right. So if you say to me, hey, conservatively, this property can make $12,000 a year in cash flow, then my question becomes, am I up for $12,000 a year in cash flow? For me, for my criteria, usually the answer is yes. Certainly with these kinds of numbers, the answer is yes. I would be interested in that. Right. And then obviously, if those conservative numbers, pardon me, were too conservative and I end up with $21,000 of cash flow instead, I'm not going to be mad about that. Right. Investing in real estate is a little bit art. It's mostly science, right? It's mostly numbers and math, and it's pretty figure out. But it's a little bit art too, right? Because certainly you've all seen. I mean, HGTV is TV, so it's pretty fake. But all the same, you've all seen on like HGTV where somebody, one of these designers will take a place that just looks awful, and they just have an eye to make it beautiful and desirable. And if you've got that talent, I don't have that talent. I don't know how to make a house, a home. I don't know how to make it desirable to other people. People probably don't want what I want. I'm kind of a unique dude, so I don't try to design a house for people, right? I just kind of go with the kind of middle of the road fixtures and whatever, and ask other people for their input. But if you're that person who you can do that, I mean, the sky is the limit, right? You can make this place really desirable. Some people, they specialize as real estate investors. They just specialize in finding spaces and making them crazy, crazy desirable, and that's how they make their money. Not everything needs to be about the nuts and the bolts here of the math, although that is, you can't just go nuts. But you can bring value in a variety of different ways to a property, right? And if that's a way that you want to do it, by really being creative, and that is valuable as well, right? There's lots of investors who make their money that way. You just got to understand this part well enough. By this part, I'm pointing to the analysis here in front of me. You just have to understand that part well enough to make sure you don't buy a lemon or a dud. And then you can always, try to bring more value to the property by bringing your creativity, your eye for things or whatever. I mean, most people don't want creativity. They want beige, popular color. Beige, gray, seafoam blue. That's what most people want, right? But, there is, of course, space for these very creative, beautiful, artistic renovations and things of that nature that you can do. And this house would be an example of a house, not where you're going to do that kind of rental. This would probably be a very standard kind of a rental, but this is a perfect example of a BRRRR, right? Buy, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Right? With this type of property, you could buy this. You probably have it flipped over in about 6 to 8 months if you're good, 12 if you're not. And you could probably get it refinanced at the end of that 8 or 12-month period and move on to the next property. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that it was good as always. Definitely trying to, so I see your hand, I'll be right with you, Liz. Definitely trying to focus a little bit more on the mindset and getting people to actually take action, because I think that that's super duper important. So please, if you have any feedback for me, I talk too much about one thing or not enough about another, or you have some questions, feel free to email me and let me know, and we'll take it from there, or to raise your hand and tell me right now in the seminar. Go ahead, Elias.
Just a quick question about the reno estimate. How did you get to that 125? Was it 25K per unit?
Yeah, so I looked at the units and I said it's gonna be probably, just based on my experience of doing like some kitchens and stuff, it's probably gonna be about 20 to 25K. I've got like probably maybe depends, but it looks like some of those cabinets can't be salvaged. So I might spend 15 to 20K on cabinetry in one or two of those units, maybe three. And then paint, paint's not too expensive, maybe $1,000, $2,000. Maybe one or two of them needed flooring as well, which that could be a few $1,000s. So around between $20,000 and $25,000, and then I have 5 units. I'm assuming they all look about the same. They don't have pictures of all of them, so I've got to make some assumptions about that. It could be that you only need to rent out like 3 of them, and they only put up the pictures of the 3 worst units. Unlikely, but possible.
Okay, and that's kitchen alone.
Well, I'm thinking that's primarily kitchen. There might be a little bit of money to do. Again, I mean, for painting, listen, if I spend $2,000 on painting, basically the whole unit. I mean, maybe not the bedroom, but most of that unit's gonna get painted. Like $2,000 goes a decent distance for paint. Um, the kitchen, I mean, it's easy to spend $20,000 in the kitchen. If you do like kitchen and flooring, it's probably gonna get you there. I mean, if you're really, really good and you're really on top of things and you're really controlling costs, you can do quite a bit more with that $25,000, but you're not going to be there. So chances are you're not going to be able to control. I mean, you'll have a decent control of costs because you control the estimates and everything like that. But like, it's hard if you're the actual person ordering materials and negotiating and everything. Like, you can get quite a bit better price than if you're buying it through the contractor. But working remotely, that's going to require a lot more effort from you. So and like, it really is a balancing act, because if you look at this property, like I'm saying, you're going to make $92,000 in active appreciation. So you could quit your job and do this deal, and it's going to pay you $92,000. You probably weren't going to earn that at work. So like, you could just focus on it, and you could maybe squeeze out an extra $20,000, or maybe not that much, but maybe like an extra $10,000 out of that reno and make it $100 and something thousand that it profits you this year. But it's going to require a lot of your attention to do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's really just, and this is true with everything, right? Like, if you want to do the perfect real estate deal, then you're going to have to micromanage every single aspect of it. If you do that, you'll make the most profit possible at the expense of the time that it took you to micromanage the deal. Yeah. So there are some people, like there are some investors out there who, like, they are crazy anal. They have everything, down to the nail. Notarized and costed and whatever. You can do that. It does make you more money. You'll be a better investor than I am, for example, right? But the question then becomes like, well, like, is that scalable? Like, okay, you can do that when you flip over a house or you renovate a 4-unit multifamily. You can't do that on a 100-unit apartment building, or at least it's really, really hard, right? So there's a scalability issue there. And also, like, I don't want to say this like I don't want to be flippant or anything, because I know when you're starting out, buying a house is daunting. And maybe when you own a house and you go to get a second house, it's still pretty daunting. But, after you buy a couple of things, it's not that daunting anymore, and you start progressing to the next thing. So a lot of real estate investors actually only spend a couple of years really focused on multifamily. And then they usually move on to commercial, either like commercial multifamily or like commercial retail, or like commercial purpose built. Like, that's what usually happens. So for a lot of investors, like, being super duper focused on squeezing every penny out of each deal is not necessarily like their primary focus or how they want to spend their time, because after they do their 5th multifamily, they'll never touch another multifamily again, kind of a thing, right? Right. Or even like, another thing that might happen is like, I'm almost at that point. So I need to acquire like 2 more houses, and then maybe I won't be doing multifamilies anymore. I don't know. We'll see. But if I get to that point, I may make it to the point where I've made enough money off of the multifamilies where I don't want to do them anymore. They're not worth my time. But I have enough money that maybe Elias will come to me with this deal, for example, and he'll say, hey, you can make 60% return on investment. And I'll say, okay, here's the money. Give me a 30% return on investment, but don't bother me. Right? And that's why I was saying, like, you see this deal and you say, oh, it's $90,000. Like, don't get hung up on the 90,000. There are people who will give you that money, right? You know, I mean, if you told me you're gonna give me back 33% on my $90,000, I'd probably give you 90,000. I don't have 90,000 to give anybody if you're hoping I would, but you know, you're gonna give me $30,000 a year on $90,000. I'm gonna say no. No, if I actually believe you're capable of doing that, I probably would give you the money because shoot, nobody's giving me 30,000. Like that's such a great return, right? That of course I would take it. I've done private mortgages; they do not pay like that. I've done real estate deals. I've done real estate deals that did not pay 30% return. So if you're gonna say I can do a real estate deal where I passively get a 30% return, and I'm getting that 30% number by dividing my 67% 5-year average return into, right? That's what I'm doing. Yeah, I would definitely I would take that. I think everybody would, right? So yeah, there's so many options when it comes to how you approach these things. And again, the job of the real estate investor is to think about and to understand things, right? To view the object of investment from as many perspectives as possible so that you fully understood what the investment is, what it can do, what it can be used for, and then you've decided what the actual best course of action is. That's the whole job. Right? And somebody has to decide because you know every building that you've ever set foot in, there's somebody who had to decide. Somebody who had to decide that they were going to build it and where they were going to build it and what it was going to do, whether they were going to buy it and change what it was used for. So there's somebody who's always thinking of making those decisions, and then that person is rewarded ultimately with the profit from the property. Toronto is a city, tens of thousands of buildings. There's an owner for every single one of them, and there are people who are making those decisions for every single one of them, right? And you can, of course, be that person. And the great thing about real estate is Toronto is a big city with tens of thousands of buildings, and there are 1,000 cities. Just, I mean, not just like it. Toronto's a pretty unique city, but just like it in the sense that there are 100 or 1,000 cities with 10,000 buildings in them, right? There's lots of them all over the world, and it's the same. I mean, with the exception of like and like whatever other communist places there are in the world, it's the same game everywhere. Yeah, you know, the tax code might be a little different. Uh, you know, the customs might be a little bit different, but essentially, once you have that real estate investing skill, and really, in so many ways, it's just the skill of investing because it does overlap so heavily with stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency, all these other things. Once you've kind of hammered that skill down a little bit, you're set. You're set. Anywhere in the world, you're set because it's the same thing everywhere. And it's just a matter of building up the capital and then employing it in the market, right? And if you're really, really good, it's not even a matter of building up the capital because you can use other people's capital, right? And so the more proficient you become, the less you require the capital, right? Like starting out, real estate looks like it requires a lot of capital and a lot of proficiency, but it actually only requires a lot of proficiency. When you're starting out and you don't have proficiency, nobody will give you their money. So you also require money and you spend your money learning to become proficient. But once you become proficient, other people give you their money. And that's true both in the sense of like, yes, getting it lent to you by maybe a private lender or an investor, but that's also true when you start out, maybe you first get interested in real estate investing, maybe you've been kind of careless with your credit, you haven't been paying attention, whatever, and your credit score is not very good. But then you start paying attention, you build up your credit score, you become more credit worthy. The bank wants to give you money, right? So it's not just a matter of building up um, your actual financial resources, which yes, those are, you know, valuable or whatever, right? Your net worth is kind of cool, but net worth is really not that important. There's a lot of people out there who maybe they don't have the net worth you'd expect, but they create awesome incomes from real estate by leveraging other people's net worths, right? And we probably all know people who have money but they don't know what to do with it, in the sense that they're old, maybe they're retired, maybe they're confused, maybe they won the lottery or they hit the jackpot at the casino or something, you know. um there's 1,001 reasons why people have money, and a lot of people have money that they don't even understand or realize that they have, right? Because again, talk about being a real estate investor, properties have equity. People who own houses have equity. Most people who have those houses, they don't understand what that is, or if they do understand, it's because they were watching late night television and somebody told them about a chip reverse mortgage or something, right? And they don't understand that they could take that equity out and they could leverage it and buy a property that produces income, and that income could cover the cost of them borrowing that money, pulling that equity out of the home, and pay them a profit. And if you are that eloquent young person who can come along and explain that to them, they might be willing to give you some of their money to pay them a return. Right? Any other questions?
Yes. In regards to bathrooms, what considerations, or from your experience, what considerations you put in bathroom rentals, and why didn't you consider that in this estimate, or if you did?
Uh okay. So it very much depends with bathrooms because it depends what's happening in the bathroom. If you go into a bathroom and you want to reconfigure it, that is, you want to start moving things, that can be very expensive. If you want to go into a bathroom and you just want to touch it up, well, bathrooms are generally relatively small spaces. They may not be very expensive to touch up. Right. So if I go into a bathroom, and this is a real example from one of our properties, one unit, well, it's in that sixplex. One of the units had the vanity and the toilet set up in such a way that like there wasn't enough space for me to sit down and use that toilet. Right. And like full disclosure, I'm 6'3", so I'm kind of tall, but no space for me to sit there. So we thought it was a little ridiculous. Like this toilet kind of needs to move, right? And in that situation, there really wasn't any space to move the toilet, so we ended up shrinking the vanity. But in that situation, you might want to move the toilet. Now you need to get a plumber in. The plumber is going to need to probably roughen the toilet in your new location, and relocating that plumbing is going to be very, very costly. Um, whereas, the bathrooms that I saw here, they looked like they needed maybe some paint. They looked like maybe a new vanity or a mirror. But like the toilet looked fine, the tub looked fine. So assuming those things are in good condition, I'd probably leave them, right? Just because they're a pain in the butt to replace. Um, and if you're just like spot replacing, like just swapping a toilet, okay, $400, you got a new toilet, whatever. But like, yeah, if you want to reconfigure anything, it becomes very costly because you're getting plumbers involved, and it's a bit of a hassle. And for me, I was just looking at these pictures, and I don't know if I still have them here. I was looking at the pictures. He does picture a bathroom. Like, to me, this bathroom, I look at this vanities, and I can see that this drawer here is maybe going, so the vanity is not in very good condition. Okay. I can see, the tub, it's blue, it's ugly, but the floor, it looks good. Right, the toilet, yeah, the toilet's a little dated, but again, the floor looks good, the toilet is probably fine. So for me, this looks like a situation where I need to paint these walls, and the ceiling, right? Because they're not
Yeah.
looking so hot. I maybe need to replace this vanity. So far I'm at, let's call it 500 to paint, 500 for the vanity. So I'm at like $1,000. Maybe I'll spend $300, $400, get a bigger mirror that's gonna fit here, right? It's gonna look a little better. Although it looks like there's a plug that might be in the way, so I don't know about that. And then here, this part in the shot, and here you need to send your contract to the property, or you need to go look at it yourself. Here, whatever this thing is on the left hand side of the shot, it looks like an organizer or something. Like, you'd have to find out what that is. Is it a part of the bathroom? Is it a shelf? Is it something I can just pull out, or is it a fixture? And then am I going to replace it, or am I just going to get rid of it? Tearing something like that out and just patching and painting, cheap. Replacing something like that, it depends what it is. I mean, it looks kind of like it was made at IKEA or something, kind of from the look of it. So it might be kind of cheap to replace, but it's hard to say. For all you know, it belongs to the tenant. It's not a part of your washroom, right? So it's really hard to say. But looking at this bathroom, like, it just doesn't look that bad. Same here, right? This is a different bathroom. Like, this vanity is not my style at all. I don't like whatever's going on with these wood doors here, but like, it's in decent condition. Um, Here, like, this is like a plaster wall or whatever, right? Because you can see the conduit. So I know I can't put this electrical inside the wall, so I'm not even gonna worry about that. Which means this mirror is probably not really moving, and there's probably not too much I can do about it without spending a fortune. And I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to make this livable. So probably just leave this alone with the exception of paint, right? And that's kind of what I was looking at with the bathrooms here again, right? There's a third bathroom you're seeing. Not a great shot. I would love to have seen a bit more of the tub to really get a better idea. But again, we can see here, I think this wall looks really rough, just like the one that the camera's up against. It's hard to say because of the sharp angle. So that's something you definitely, again, you're going to want somebody to put some eyeballs on. At a bare minimum, it probably requires paint. These walls, I don't know, like, I guess white is a good bathroom color, but I don't like white in bathrooms. Give them something like a little creamy or something that just doesn't quite show off the dirt quite as well. But anyways, yeah, you'd probably do the same thing here. You can see a electrical outlet with like a Glade plug-in or something in it. So you can see, oh sorry, you can see since there's an outlet there and the vanity's right below it, there's a pretty good chance that wherever the mirror is, it's kind of stuck because the electrical's in the way, right? So there are things I can change and there are things I can't change, right? And you looking at bathrooms, especially, like the biggest question is it functional? Is it safe? Right. Then the second question is like, is it attractive? And then the rest is kind of irrelevant because that's all that I require, right? Is it the most comfortable, luxurious, relaxing spa bathroom in the world? Doesn't matter that much, right? Um, so that's it. That's all I'm thinking about when I look at those bathrooms is there expensive stuff to fix here or is it the cheap stuff? In this case, it's the cheap stuff. I'm not doing flooring. I'm not doing toilets. I might have a bathtub to do in one, but across five, if I have to do that in one or two, then my pricing stays the same. If I have to do it for all five, then that's a little different. And that's one thing you'd really want to look at, right? Is you want to get somebody in there who is going to assess, do we have any leaking, any water getting in or out of these bathrooms? Because that's really where your expense is going to come in. Is if that is happening, doing the repair and potentially cleaning up any mold issues or anything like that, that can get quite costly. Right. So assuming that these bathrooms are functioning properly and it's just cosmetic, it's quite cheap. It's quite cheap.
Cool. So in most cases it would be just like a touch up kind of thing, right?
Like in most cases, again, if you're getting any kind of leaking, you've got a problem. Then that's probably not gonna be cheap. It's not gonna be a touch up.
Yeah.
If you just want to swap some things, right? Like some people are environmental, like they're really concerned about the environment or whatever. They want to put in a low flow toilet or something. You can do that. That's really cheap, right? Because you're just replacing the fixture. You're not moving it or anything. As soon as you get into reconfiguring, oh, I want the door to be here. Oh, I want to move the vanity over there. Oh, I want the toilet to be here. Oh, I need better feng shui, whatever, any of that stuff. It's suddenly now we're talking into the tens of thousands, right? You're moving things, you're plumbing, you're everything. So you want to try to avoid that if you can, right?
Gotcha.
And that's one thing, like when you're looking at some of these potential investment properties and you're looking at doing a burr or a flip or a rehab of some sort, right? Is one of the very important things is they talk about like the bones of a building, the layout of a building is super duper clutch. Right? A building with a good layout that you do not need to reconfigure will be much much cheaper to renovate than, let's say, a building where like the layout is poor and you need to open things up and you need to because those are the types of rentals that are A, difficult, B, expensive, and C, involve the city. Right. And all those are all things you want to avoid as much as possible. Involving the city costs time and money. Right. So if you can avoid it in a renovation situation, right? Like as soon as you have a project that requires the city, you can basically double how long your project's gonna take because of the city and permits and everything like that, right? So those are the things you want to avoid. And if you see a property with the potential and you say it's got a lot of potential, but I need to open it up, for example, you have to understand that might involve beams, that might involve a structural engineer. There's work that goes into that. And yes, the final result might be beautiful. And yes, it may greatly improve the value of the home. But as long as you understand what the cost to do that is going to be, and you go into that with your eyes open, right? Obviously, it is so much easier if you just avoid those types of situations and those types of expenses because then you just don't have to deal with them, right? But of course, there are investors who, I mean, that's what they target. They tackle that kind of a thing because they know a lot of investors shy away from it because it's not as easy, and they can make extra money doing it, right? But you really got to be good and have your systems down if you want to do some of these more intricate renos, because you're racing against time, right? And so time management becomes important because time is carrying costs, right? And so you really need to make sure that things are happening when you expect them to, so that you're moving in tenants when you expect to, so that you don't drain out all of your money, sorry, before you get the before you get the reno completed, right? And that's if you're ever watching like HGTV and they've got all that tension going on where they're like, oh, we got to get the reno done. Oh, and now we're 1 month over schedule. We got to get the reno done. It's like, well, that's all for TV and everything. But I mean, you got to understand, if you've got a property, it's costing you $1,000 in mortgage payments, $300 in taxes, $300 in insurance. It's costing you $300 in gas and electric and water, and it's costing you another $150 in this and another blah 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 in that. And you got garbage removal and snow collection. Like, you're spending $3,000 a month to keep this property empty, right? And every month that you go over schedule, the extra $3,000 out of your pocket, right? So it's costing you a lot of money, and sometimes it can cost a lot more than $3,000, right? So that's just something you have to be mindful of. Is try to pick properties with good bones, because they're much easier to flip over than properties with bad bones that you've got to now do reconstructive surgery on.
And how would you be able to identify that? Like the good versus the bad? That's the contractor, that's the inspector, that's the
No, I mean, definitely
who's the professional specialist?
there isn't one. You're the investor. I mean, the contractor can definitely help you and give you a good idea. I mean, good bones is an opinion thing, right? It's not a scientific thing. So
Okay.
there's not
So
somebody
like
who,
foundation kind of thing.
yeah, it's not that, right? It's like
Okay.
when you walk into a house, you know how sometimes you walk into a house and you're like, wow, this is a really nice house. I like how it's laid out.
Yeah.
That's good bones, right? And sometimes you walk into a house and you're like, man, why the hell is this room here? Why does this door lead over there? That's bad bones, right? So it's not really something that there's an expert or there's someone on your team who's going to tell you that. That's something you're going to kind of use your own judgment for. Right. And then again, remember, like, just visual spatial skills here, right? Is like, a house is a big old space that's then subdivided, right, into rooms, right? You could obviously subdivide it differently than the way it's done right now. It's just been done this way. So you need to walk in with the visual spatial skills to say, hey, what would be the best way to allocate this space to maximize the money? Right. I mean, you could look at a property and you could divide it into 4 units, or you might be clever and you might be able to divide it into 5 units. Right. And then you've got to figure out, well, am I better off with 4 large, spacious 2-bedroom units? Or am I better off with 5 cramped, not very spacious 5-bedroom units? What does the market prefer? Try and figure out what's going to make you the most money on that property, right? Because sometimes you're better off with the 4 spacious units and you're going to have more of like an upscale offering and you're going for like the top of the market. And that might make you more money than 5 lower end units that are more aimed at the bottom of the market, right? And the only person who knows, the professional whose job that is the investor. They're the person who makes those value judgments. That's what the investor brings to the table.
Good stuff. I have one last question.
No problem.
Last question, because you talked about on the rental side again. Usually, what is, say, for example, on this, you decide to burr,
Mm-hmm.
right? The burr route, which is more enticing, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
At 120, like, how long is the timeline as far as the renovation project? Like, what's the average like timeline if you decide to go that route? Is it a 3 months, 6 months,
I understand what you are
4
trying to
months, 6
ask.
months? It depends on the.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to ask. It's a very tricky thing to answer. Like, I don't know, for a project like this, you could probably get. Okay, hold on. I would say for a project like this, if you could do this in 6 months, if you're pretty good and you're pretty on top of things. There are investors out there who are very good and very on top of things who could flip this house in 3 months. Rare, but they do exist. Uh, your average person will probably take a year or longer on this project, right? So, so here's the thing, right? A good investor is going to move in with all their team on day one. They're going to figure out everything that needs to happen in all 5 units, and they're just going to go and they're going to get it done, and they're going to have the money available to pay for it, and they're just move, move, move. Your average investor might try to do that if they have a good team. Chances are they may not know everybody they need to bring into the property on day one. And they're going to try to identify everything that they want to do. But chances are a lot of them are not necessarily going to have the capital ready to do all the units all at once. So what a lot of them will end up doing is they'll do it piecemeal, right? Maybe they'll do 2 units, or they'll do 3 units, or they'll do 1 unit at a time, right? They'll do units as they become vacant, that kind of thing. And so that's what leads to it taking a year. So when I say it's going to take a year for your average person, I'm not saying that the property is going to be 100% vacant for a whole year while they're working on this. I'm saying it'll probably be partially tenanted the whole year while they work on bits and pieces. And some people won't even finish in that year because they'll have trouble getting rid of tenants and stuff like that, and it'll take longer. Yeah, but again, if you do it well, if you're organized and you have all of your systems in place and you really thought about everything, you could easily flip this over in 6 months. Like it is possible. The biggest obstacle really for an investor in flipping something like this over quickly is just in Ontario dealing with the landlord tenant board, and like getting rid of legacy tenants is slow. So that's going to be your biggest obstacle, really. Right. Your second biggest obstacle is like, do you actually have the capital? Do you have the $100,000 to do the reno? Right? Because you can't. I mean, within reason, you might be able to get some of that financed by the bank, but generally speaking, like you're going to need to have that cash on hand, whether it came from a lender or not. But you're going to need to have it, right? Those are really the two big things that are going to determine how quickly you do it, right? But it so depends. Everybody is different. Every business is different. That's a part of what you bring to the table, right? Is how well or poorly you organize things. And if you do a good job, you can get this done much, much faster than the people who don't. Right? And that's why I say like 3 months for a really good investor versus a year for like an average, right? It's like it's a big spread for sure, because it just depends on your skill set.
So that's it for moi today. Merci.
Derrière. Thank you again for yeah, of course. Thank you for joining me again. We went a little longer than we usually do today, but I hope it was worth it. I am working on it's actually done, but I didn't want to share with you because I'm still kind of testing it and prototyping it. I'm gonna send out maybe next week, certainly before the end of the month. I'm gonna send out a little worksheet for all of you to track your net worth. It's an income statement and a balance sheet for you to fill out and track your own net worth and your income situation and your cash position, so you can get a better idea of where you are as an individual in terms of your own financial health, or report card, if you will. And hopefully that's something I'll send out maybe in the next week or two to kind of help you all focus in on what your financial and investing goals are for the year. So that's coming up, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to put together kind of a recap of a lot of the stuff we went over last year in terms of the analysis, some of the fundamentals, all of the like investing principles, and going over some of the vocabulary and all those things again. Really kind of give you guys a refresher and a reminder, and review everything. And then I'm hoping that by the springtime, for those of you who are regular attendees, everybody will be refreshed and ready to go buy a deal or two. And I'm hoping that we all will buy at least one this year. I've had such a privilege to be able to watch a few people go on an investing journey, whether guided by me or just kind of parallel to me, and see the success, and certainly the money and those sorts of things that it's brought to their lives. And I mean, it's really awesome to see people grow and really see things click for people. And so I hope that we can add you all to that list of people I've seen that happen for, because I think we need more people in the world going out there and taking action and reclaiming their personal power. I think that's what's really lacking in the world right now. And I so appreciate all of you coming out and doing your part in learning today, and hopefully next week. And I can't wait to see the fruits of your labor. So, all of you, enjoy your Sunday. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk soon. And like I said earlier in the seminar, if you have any questions or anything you don't feel like reaching out, in the seminar like Elias does, that's fine. Shoot me an email, give me a call, send me a text. You all are capable of getting in touch with me, um, and let me know what I can do to help you, and I'd be happy to, at the very least, try. Right, at the very least, try. So, thanks again. I hope you all enjoy your week, and we'll talk soon.
Au revoir, everyone. Take care.